The unemployment rate among young people in Ontario is more than double the rate of the general population. If you've got a kid between the ages of 15 and 24, or you are one, you will appreciate how tough it is to get that first job, which can open the door to experience and opportunity. Vass Bednar chaired the federal government's so-called expert panel on youth employment, and she has written a policy paper as part of the Ontario 360 project, offering some free advice for the next provincial government on how to reduce youth unemployment. And she joins us now with more. Vass, nice to have you in that chair.
Nice to be here.
Let's just start with a definition of youth unemployment, because I'm not sure everybody watching this will think that somebody who's 15 or 16 and hasn't got a job is unemployed. What do you think?
In terms of youth unemployment, so federally, we were actually looking at young people aged 15 to 29. But these would be people that, if they're in school and not looking for a job, then they wouldn't be counted there. So young people who are looking for work and at that time of measurement, not finding it.
So even if you're 15, 16, 17 years old, out of school, and you're looking for work, you are considered among the unemployed if you can't find a job.
You got it.
Despite how young you are.
Yes.
Okay. Because obviously a lot of people think 55 laid off from my manufacturing job, that's unemployed.
Right.
16 is unemployed?
We do have some options in terms of starting to think about segmenting our young people, right? Because you're right, talking about people aged 15 to probably 19 is a little bit different than 20 to 24 and 25 to 29. And a lot of what we look at with youth employment is about making those transitions, so making the transition from school to work or the transition from work to school. But what we're seeing now with young people is that they're entering a much different labor market, right? There's much more short-termism to work, more contract work. So we have to dig beyond that binary too, and not just look at who's employed and who's unemployed, but understand of those people that are employed, what is their employment outlook like? Right. What kind of labor market are they entering, and what does that mean for Canada?
That's the key, I guess, because harkening back many years ago to my own time in this age demographic, I think the numbers were similar. People my age were twice as unemployed as everybody else. Yeah. We were entering a different labor market back then than the kids are today. Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of important changes even from just a generation ago when it comes to the labor market experiences that young people are finding, be they teens or be they in their 20s. And a huge piece that's driving that is the digitization of the labor market, which is not something I think we look at quite enough. But on the one hand, it's fantastic. We have more labor market information than ever before. Someone could be applying to a job right now while they're watching us, right? You're kind of at home on the couch watching the live stream. But what that does is for entry-level positions and for people starting out, drives up the demand and application. So people are flooded. And what that does is it amplifies the need for social capital. Meaning what?
So not that social capital is historically new, but we're starting to tell our young people that, who you know matters. Have coffee. We literally tell people, have coffee with random people, forge this faux familiarity. We're placing this emphasis on networks and brands that when you take a step back, you have to ask, is that healthy? Is that equitable? And who might that privilege in terms of when it comes to getting a foot in the door? So
you can't tell people not to do it. That's certainly from time immemorial. That's a way to get ahead.
No, you can't tell people not to do it, but we can also leverage more of that digitization and introduce more screening, reduce some of the bias in our matching, and also probably do a more efficient job of matching people when it comes to at least starting out in their careers.
What are the reasons that you, in your research, hear today as to why companies won't take a chance on hiring a young person?
So the research has been consistent, across generations. Employers, when surveyed, will always say, generally, that they think young people aren't quite ready. Something I think that was a little bit different that our panel heard is that we heard from a lot more small and medium-sized enterprises. So again, going across generations, how is Canada's labor market different now? It's not a bad thing. There's much more small businesses that may have, an inherent unpredictability. They don't have opportunities for young people to advance. They don't have extra benefits that people might be looking for. And we also have the growth of the third sector, nonprofits, social enterprises. So we see a generation that is largely purpose-driven, mission-driven, attracted to this type of work. Arguably, there are lower barriers to entry. So they're able to, when you look at the job search, they're able to find that job. But in terms of retention or career growth, if they want to advance, they can do, one of the only ways they can do that is by going somewhere else. And that's where we start to see churn, and we start to see people kind of having many different jobs, which we may interpret as people who are not loyal in the workforce or not worth investing in. But it's a symptom of something else.
Okay, so I hear you telling me millennials are getting a bad rap then.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you, I know that the current Ontario government put a higher minimum wage in place if they get re-elected, going up to $15 next January, because they want to make life easier for people who are at the low end of the income scale. Do you think it may have had a perverse impact on young people as well, in as much as employers will say it costs too much to take a chance on a 18, 20, 25-year-old now?
It may have. There may be some marginal effects for younger people just starting out. We do know, back to the earlier question about teens, right? 15 to 18 tend to be clustered in retail and service work that's lower paying, that a lot of these could be the minimum wage jobs. I think the provincial and federal governments have gotten a lot better at taking a broader view and a broader perspective of how do we make investments in a workforce to build a resilient Canada. So we didn't talk about minimum wage in our report because it was federal, but we did struggle in that so many of the policy levers that do affect youth employment outcomes, as you've noted, are clustered provincially. And the provinces are doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to building a better labor force for tomorrow.
Well, how much of the problem of youth unemployment do you want to put at the feet of our post-secondary institutions?
I want to go back to that question of what's different now, because it's something that came up a lot for the panel, and I think it's a great question to ask. So we touched on digitization of the labor market and the amplification of social capital. We touched on more small and medium-sized enterprises and nonprofits. Our post-secondary institutions have been remarkably resilient to the transformations that are taking place. So we're telling young people, you've got to be flexible and adaptable. Jobs are being created that we can't even describe to you now because they're going to be so, novel and whatever. And other jobs are going to be totally displaced, but we can't quite predict how because of machine learning and other advancements in automation. So we are creating a very anxious, new work cohort that is then mimicking what we used to do, over time in post-secondary. And we're seeing much less linear career paths now. So some people want to go back to school. Many more students are part-time. A lot of the benefits or scholarships for students are targeted at people who are full-time. So I think our universities need to walk that talk a little bit more, for lack of a better cliche than that, and demonstrate that they too are flexible and adaptable to this new world of work. We see some clues. We see the de-risking of entrepreneurship. So incubators are kind of hot right now on campus. We're seeing more move towards co-ops and work-integrated learning that's helping bridge that gap between school and work. But I think universities and colleges and our polytechnics could do a lot more. And it's a system. You're seeing people go back to school, go back to college to skill up, but they want to keep working, or they've started families, or there is a new skill or a new area of work that they'd like to enter, but they need a credential in order to do that.
Let me read an excerpt from the piece that you wrote for Ontario 360. Here we go. There is lots of work to be done amid the recognition and anticipation of the pending labor force disruptions of advances in automation and artificial intelligence. But if our colleges, universities, and polytechnics are the training vehicles for the new world of work, they too must become as flexible as the young people we are cautioning and conditioning with urgent mantras of adaptability or risk irrelevance as a result of a fundamental hypocrisy. Pick that apart for me. You want them to become flexible, meaning what?
I want them to recognize that if when they survey employers, which we constantly do, if we know that the most desirable skills are things like critical thinking and communication, then we need to be making sure that we're certifying, the young people of Ontario, of Canada, with these skills, which are very difficult to certify. So the labor market does not care as much that you have a BA in computer science. You have a technical skill that's credentialed. People are looking for these other skills that are much more nuanced and difficult to sort of prove that you have. So I think our institutions have to take that into account. And I also think that there's just a lot we could do in recognizing that the labor force values experience so much. Perhaps we overvalue it. And we're very narrow in our definition of experience, right? Literally, it's, our best indicator of if you can do a job seems to be, have you done it before?
Have you done the job, yes.
So, can our post-secondary institutions help us expand and evolve that definition of experience? Because if you have experience of being a full-time student for 4 years or a part-time student for 4 years with that undergraduate experience, how do we articulate that and make those connections to the labor market so that employers are willing, as you said, to invest or take a risk on a younger person that maybe doesn't have that traditional experience that they're looking for?
Let's finish up on this. Do we need governments to create newer programs which have greater subsidies, which offer more encouragement for government to hire young people?
I don't think we need more subsidies for employers to hire young people.
Okay.
I think we need to consider the retention piece. So we don't have great numbers on employers that are good at employing young people. We don't necessarily value those employers. We're starting to see some employers make targeted, calls for young people. RBC has their Future Youth program. They're setting a target of how many young people. Even, on a different end of the spectrum, Starbucks is starting to talk about goals they have employing vulnerable youth. And that's really interesting. I mean, Starbucks has a really interesting penetration of the labor market. And they're recognizing, they're not forever jobs, but they're going to build some skills that are valuable in the workplace. But, you and I can start looking online for representation of minorities, of women, be they on boards or sometimes at a company. It's something that people either want to champion or obscure. If we truly value the firms that are making these investments in young people and of the economies of tomorrow, then I'd like to know who they are, and I'd like to know who they aren't, so that we can all kind of do a better job kind of prompting and encouraging that.
That would be useful information. We remind everybody yours is one of 30 position papers on the on360.ca website out of the U of T School of Public Policy and Governance, and lots of free advice for the next government of Ontario, whoever it is.
That's right.
That's Vass Bednar. Thanks for coming in tonight, Vass.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.